No, your eyes aren't deceiving you. It's 2021 and we are talking McLaren Mercedes. The Woking team recently came back to their estranged power unit supplier of 19 years for this upcoming 2021 season. The road wasn't an easy one, as you can see on my McLaren Honda video, but ultimately it was the right choice. Or was it? In today's video we're going to go through the path of the last few years and find out if the Mercedes power unit was the correct choice for the McLaren chassis. Before we get going, if it's your first time on the channel, welcome, but if it's not, then make sure you subscribe and have clicked the notification bell so you don't miss any new uploads. In the last few years, the Mercedes team have been dominating with what was the superior chassis but sometimes an inferior power unit. When looking at 2017, 2018 and part of the 2019 season, we can clearly see that for many races the Ferrari strapped to the back of the Ferrari was faster than the Mercedes strapped to the back of the Mercedes. This pushed the Germans to innovate even more, to finally edge out Ferrari and be in a class of their own. And then the whole Ferrari FIA power unit situation happened, and the upwards of £400 million spent by Mercedes were taking effect, while Ferrari were not just slowed down, but stopped, tasered and kicked well down, in what turned to be the slowest power unit for 2020. This finally made the Mercedes the dominant package, taking pretty much every win of 2020. Overall, it's impossible to say no to that package in isolation. In the other hand, we have Renault. The French supplier were dominant in their partnership with Red Bull in the early 2010s, taking 4 consecutive titles with them and 47 wins between 2009 and 2013. But when the hybrid era started, they were caught napping by Mercedes, who had been developing the power unit with an insane budget due to the separate facilities to the main F1 operation, and while they took 102 wins since the change in regulations, Renault has fallen to a lowly 12 in the same period. The main issue has been reliability. An increase in power or tighter engine covers was enough to set it off sometimes, and the issue kinda worsened over the years. In my opinion, the lowest point was 2018. While the main Renault team had their best season to date results-wise, finishing 4th in the championship, their customer team suffered around 15 power-related DNFs, and one of the drivers was almost pushed to their breaking point. Ever since then though, they have made considerable improvements, and for 2020 it was a toss-up between Honda and Renault for the second best power unit package, and while in 2018 they were the only option for McLaren, and the second worst at that, I wouldn't be surprised if a few teams weren't considering them right now if they weren't for contract obligations or further commitments to the suppliers like Haas or Alfa Romeo. While the Mercedes is probably better than the Renault, we have to take into account a few things. How deep into diminishing returns we are, how close all the power units actually are to each other, and how the incoming engine freeze is going to affect both. First off, apart from the Ferrari who screw it up on their own, every power unit is pretty much at peak performance, and while every gram and every horsepower counts, a difference of 5 or 10 horses when comparing hatchbacks might be huge, but when comparing 1000 horsepower plus prototypes, there could be a power unit freeze with no significant harm done. While there aren't any publicly available metrics, the amount of money being shoveled into development to gain an extra horsepower is just insane, and while the budget cap being put in place doesn't restrict power unit spending, the inevitably incoming engine freeze definitely will. With Renault introducing a new spec coming into 2022, Honda leaving the sport and hopefully Ferrari catching up, there will inevitably be a convergence in the power department between the suppliers, and keeping in mind that the next big regulation change concerning drivetrains is scheduled for 2027, it won't do the sport any harm. The upgrade system coming into 21 also plays a part into whether it was the right move, and this one has as many pros as it does cons. For starters, the new regulations limit not only the parts that are able to be upgraded during the season, but it implements a token system that determines a maximum number of upgrades for the many important parts, requires a homologation process, and each has their own value. For example, a suspension tweak will cost 2 of the 6 available tokens. Since McLaren are the only team changing power unit suppliers, FOM had decided that the change will mean a total use of the available tokens. That's why we saw the MCL35 change so drastically and quickly last season. It was to give as many upgrades before the deadline would lock important parts of the car like the drastic new front wing in place. It means that while the power unit might give a few horsepower buff, the overall outlook in the closest midfield ever will maybe hinder McLaren due to the lack of big upgrade packages. The question is, will the drivers be enough to counter the weight of the frozen car? I'm hoping so, but there is no guarantee. It isn't all bad news though. When comparing, let's say during 2020, Both power units perform admirably, although the Mercedes developed a defect that affected the MGUK and will hopefully be mended coming into 2021. And if the trend continues, the slight but significant power difference in favor of Mercedes can make the difference between finishing P3 and P6 in the standings. The change has also meant that the MCL35M is the only car for 2021 with a revamped chassis to accommodate the new engine. But with F1 teams being F1 teams, I'll bet anything that they'll try to sneak in at least one extra change that will be labeled as absolutely critical for the switch and will grant an aerodynamic boost, maybe even a loophole. The changes won't only be mechanical. The #Dream Team is now fully assembled, and while the addition of Ricciardo to the roster may seem like a nice bonus, Zak Brown revealed that it was always part of his master plan. Before bringing in James Key, he was already eyeing the Australian because where were they both working in 2012 and 2013? Oh, that's right, Toro Rosso. But Brown not only brought in Key because he's a brilliant technical director, but because he knows how to work with and extract the most out of the 7-time winner Ricciardo. Quite smart is that guy, don't you think? So what is my overall opinion? I think we have to think about this in terms. The short term may be a handicap for this 2021, but looking into 2022 and beyond, there is no doubt in my mind that both the Renault and Mercedes will probably have done a similar job, with the difference being that the Renault is still in question of if they will overtake the Germans, while with Mercedes they are expected to be the class of the field. Now that every piece of the puzzle is in its slot, I am super excited to see what the future brings for McLaren, Renault and Mercedes, because competition always ends up benefiting us by putting on a show. So what do you guys think? Was the power unit change necessary? Do you think it will help McLaren in the long term? And what are your predictions for this 2021 season for them? Leave them in the comments down below. You know I read every single one of them. If you like what you saw today, feel free to like the video, subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell to get notified of my uploads. If you're binging my channel, first of all, thank you, and second of all, here you have my most recent video to continue doing so. As always, thank you for watching and I will see you next week.